Welcome back to the WWIA Podcast. We hope you're enjoying this special podcast series on the John McDaniel story. If you are, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred podcast service. Let's learn more about John's military service as we dive into Part 6, Command and General Staff College and D.C.
Yeah, a little Crimson and Clover there. Yeah, so Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. You know, if you're still with me, then God bless you, because you got more stomach than I do for this. But, you know, it's a couple weeks later since I did a recording here. And now I've got a chance back in the Airstream here at MacDill Air Force Base to continue on with my military story. So, you know, I'm going to do that. Just knock out another couple quick chapters here in the name of progress. You know, and so I think where I last left off was, you know, I believe I just finished Kosovo, being deployed for you know, in support of combat operations there in Kosovo. And then, so it's 1999 time frame. I am, just to level the playing field, you know, I'm a major at this point, a relatively new major. And it's, you know, the year 1999, going on 2000. And I'm just coming off a mission, and I think as soon as I get back to Colorado Springs there, I get ready to go to the Command and General Staff College, CGSG as it was referred to back then. And back in the day, in my day anyway, CGSG was a major cut. It was a 50% cut that got to go to the resident course in Fort Leavenworth, where the prison system is, on the military base there at Leavenworth, Kansas, and attend the Command and General Staff College. And if you were selected to go in what they called in resident, meaning you were there to attend for a year long of schooling, then you were essentially in the top 50% of your year group. So things have gotten really thin in the Army at this point, you know, moving from 20 divisions down to 10. You know, we cut our military strength in half, you know, after the wall went down. And, you know, in the Reagan years, we started the Congress and the administration began to really slice and dice the military. So, you know, making it into that cut was no cakewalk. So I felt really fortunate to be going to school at Leavenworth. Not that I was just in the top 50%, but I really wanted that course, a year-long course, you know, for field grade officers. And those who don't know, when you make it to the rank of major or 04, you become quote unquote one of them. You know, you get the frontal lobotomy and all that, and basically, you know, it means you're in it for the long haul at this point. You know, so I get a regular Army commission, RA commission, when I pin on the rank of major. And then I go on to, to the Command and General Staff College for a year. Class of 2000, I might add. So it's 23 years ago. So it was a great course. You know, I mean, I don't have a whole lot of, you know, great stories to tell you there. I did double down. And get a double major. I ended up pursuing my MBA. It took me longer than a year. It took me 2 years to finish it. But I did get my master's in business while I was there, also at the Command and General Staff College. I had to follow up and finish it when I went to my new assignment. And that's what I want to talk about, because I think there's, anecdotally, there's a couple of interesting stories in there. And so the Army was transitioning to this new way of managing its officer corps at this time frame in the year 2000. And what they were doing is the Army had realized that we had these pockets of talent and expertise in certain, certain functional areas, if you will, in the Army. In other words, space operations was a functional area. Public affairs was a functional area. FAO, functional area. There's all kinds of, information technology, a functional area, which basically means that they began to recognize that we should start single tracking officers after a certain level right about that time, mid-career, and give them a whack at transitioning into a specialty if they had the skill set and the desire and the Army had the need, And so, I was looking pretty hard at my career at that point. And, based on, some injuries that I had and things that, didn't allow me to, be as competitive as I think I needed to be in the infantry space, I elected to go to transition into this FA-40 space operations arena. And it's not like I just come out of Kosovo, and I certainly had been doing, real world operations there, space operations there in support of national defense objectives. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And so a year of school after that, I was going to go on to my first or second at this point, I guess, space operations job and finish out my career, the last, 8-10 years of it in that vein, if you will, along that plateau and along those lines. So, it comes time for the end of the school year and branch is showing up, that branch being the branch specialist that are going to make the assignments, the follow-on assignments out of Leavenworth after this year of schooling. And the guy shows up and he's like, John, you got a really good file. I think you'd be a great replacement for me, here in this, at PERSCOM, the Personnel Command, making assignments for the, newly minted FA-40 officers and managing that career field. And I said, yeah, I don't think so, Jerry. I certainly appreciate the offer, but I'm not going to D.C. It's not my bag, And I'm thinking, I don't want anything to do with D.C. I don't want to go to the Pentagon. I don't want to, go to D.C. I just, I want to be somewhere where I can be outside, be in the outdoors. I don't want to be part of a concrete jungle. I don't want to sit behind a desk all day long and make assignments. God bless them. So I told him no politely, and this kept coming back into my life. John, hey, it's Jerry at PERSCOM. Hey, listen, really think this is a great job for you. I'm getting sort of wedged into this thing. Long story short, I told Jerry twice no. Then I got a call from somebody else at PERSCOM. I told him no, and then I got a fourth and final call. And it didn't go. It kind of went like this: John, congratulations, you're coming to D.C. And I said, yes, sir. I'm proud to do it. And so, I did drag my feet on it, and I did put up a little bit of objection to it, polite objection, I might add. But I lost that battle and ultimately ended up having to go to the nation's capital and serve at a little place called PERSCOM, or the Personnel Command, managing these, FA-40s, who were space operations officers. And for my sins, what they also give me? The public affairs officers. So I had the FA-40s and the FA-46s. Public affairs officers, they take pictures, they write stories. They used to jokingly say, hey, man, get over it. You know what you do for a living? You take pictures and you write stories. So... I know. I love them all. Just being me. And anyway, so long story short, I had that population too. You know what I knew about public affairs at that time? About what you could stick in a thimble. Okay, and here I am, the Army and all of its infinite wisdom. You've got me running the assignments for the FA-40s and the FA-40 space operations and FA-46. Those are the public affairs officers. And oh, by the way, they gave me the Army astronaut program. I had to manage the Army astronaut program, and I'll tell you a quick vignette about that. In a minute, but the assignment there at PERSCOM was actually a pretty rewarding assignment for a couple of reasons. And I'll tell you, 9/11 happened. When I was there on my watch, I was about a mile from the Pentagon when it happened. And the interesting story is, just before 9/11. The chief of staff of the Army at the time, this guy was a 4-star general by the name of Eric Shinseki. And General Shinseki was a 4-star general who, had plenty of Vietnam experience, a Purple Heart, and I think he was had a prosthetic leg from his injuries in Vietnam, and by all standards, a superior officer, just a great guy. And you didn't really ever hear anything bad about General Shinseki. And this note came down to landed on my desk. Of course, my boss handed it to me and basically said, dig into this. This one's yours, hot potato. So it had come down from the from General Shinseki that said, why are the astronauts not being promoted? Question mark. That was his deal. And it turns out, here it is. And the Army's got these lieutenant colonels and colonels who are actually working for NASA and really astronauts. And they've got astrophysicist degrees. And they're really, the 100-pound heads, the brain trust, if you will, in the Army relative to the astronaut program. And every single one of them was a test pilot from Pax River. So they're flying all these experimental aircraft. They're amazing wizards in the sky. They got PhDs, and they're not being promoted to colonel. And General Shinseki, wants to know why. I think it's a brilliant question. I would want to know why too. And so, that lands on my desk to answer that question. So I start doing some digging through their files, and it appears to me, immediately, what's going on. They never went, on to this advanced schooling, okay, that was reserved for guys who were going to go command at the battalion level. So, if you never went to the War College, that's, the Carlisle, there's a couple options there, but Fort Carlisle is one of them, where you could go and get, the school knocked out for a year before you went and commanded. Well, the astronauts didn't go to the school because they weren't going to go command. Their career path didn't look like those that were competing to go command at the 05 level. So they never made 06. The board looked at their stuff and they haven't been to the War College. Pass. And so to make this story a little shorter, I had answered this question, why weren't they getting selected to go, to promoted rather very rapidly? Hey, their files don't look like, the others. They none of them have been to the War College. Aha. So I ended up having to, of course, there's the Army for you, right? I got to brief my boss, who's a lieutenant colonel, then her boss, who's a colonel, my senior boss, and then the chief of staff, and ultimately the 2-star general, at PERSCOM, who happens to be none other than, wait for it, Dorian Anderson, my Ranger buddy that I met, when I went to go interview with the regimental commander when I was in Panama. He's ascended from major to 2-star general at this point, and he's commanding the Army's Personnel Command. And so I got to brief him, and then I got to brief the 3-star General Maud, who's the DESPER, Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, and ultimately the Vice Chief of Staff, General Keane, 4-star. The Vice Chief is Shinseki's, Vice Chief. He's not the chief, but he's the one guy below that, the vice, if you will. So, but that's where the buck stops, at the vice. The chairman himself doesn't take a lot of briefings. It's usually the vice, who's like this axe-wielding dude. And General Keane, 4-star, who you probably see on TV every now and again. He's a bit of a military pundit, if you will, and on a lot of the Fox networks and this kind of thing. But anyway, brilliant man. Okay, and so I gotta wade my way through all these generals with this briefing to describe, because they don't want to be surprised. They want to know what the answer to the question is before the big boss does, of course. And so this briefing packet that I had PowerPoint packet that I put together with like 5 slides maybe, answering the general's question, why didn't they get promoted? I had done that, but every time I went to another general, let's put this in here about the Pax River. We need some new helicopters at Pax River. Let's put that in there too. And, so this packet grew as like a classic pork belly bill, going through Congress. The military, all my bosses had that 5 slides went to like 35 slides, The thing was, it was a hefty, half or quarter, 3/4 inch packet by the time everybody got done adding their 2 cents in there. And I'm the guy that's got to brief it, right? And so at one point I said, with all due respect, sir, I was talking to my boss, my senior boss, was kind of, going through how I was going to go when I was going to go brief General Keane. I said, sir, these helicopters really don't have, that we've shoved into this PowerPoint presentation along with all this other stuff. It doesn't really have anything to do with the general's question. The general's question was very simple. Why didn't they get promoted? And now you want me to talk about helicopters? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, yeah, I know, John, but, we don't get in front of the vice chief very often, so we're just going to, blah, 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 blah. It's like, all right, sir, who got it? So here we are in the day of the briefing General Keane. I've briefed everybody. By the way, I was standing in General Maud's office, okay, 3 days before the attack on the Pentagon. And General Maud, 3-star Timothy Maud, is now gone, okay? And, the nose of the aircraft went right through his office. And I remember standing in his office to brief him on this packet, like 3 days before 9/11, and looking out. He was running a little late, and his aide kind of entertained me, and I was looking out over the Gardens of Stone, the Arlington, and you could, see the Capitol building and the mall. I mean, it's just an amazing office, right, with a beautiful view. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, so this is what happens when you really make it in this organization. You get one of these offices. Anyway, may he rest in peace, because I thought he was a fine officer, too, from what I knew of him, but now he's gone. But anyway, so, go back to the story. And I've got, we get to the Pentagon, short bus ride. We get to the Pentagon, I'm standing there outside of General Keane's office. His aide, who's Lieutenant Colonel, outranks me at the time, because I'm a major. He's like, "Are you the briefer?" I said, "Yes, sir." He's got a little notebook, or one of those, I don't know what the heck, like a notebook, billboard sort of thing, where you would, you could write on it, right, with a clip. And so he says to me, "All right, so you're going to enter the door here." He's got the whole thing drawn out. This is the table you're going to sit at. This is where you're going to sit. This is where the general's going to sit. He's got it all. All right, sir. Well, just tell me when to go. And so we go on in. We sit down. It's me. There's Dorian Anderson's come along. My boss, Colonel Baker's there. Timothy Maud, the 3-star, is there. The SMDC, Space and Missile Defense Commander, a 3-star general, is there. So, I've already briefed all these guys. They know what's in this packet, and we're waiting for General Keane to show up. And, the generals are all kibitzing, and I'm sitting there, Major McDaniel. I'm the briefer, and I got to pass out the briefing, packets and everything. And finally, all of a sudden, the elephants are dancing. The generals are kibitzing, and I'm not saying peep, because I got nothing to say. I'm not in that crowd. So all of a sudden, General Keane walks in. He's got his, black jacket on. It's zipped up to his neck. And then, there's all the stars on his shoulder. And he, walks in. His hair is perfect. And, he's a big man. He sits down. And, hi, Bill, Jim. Hi, Tim. How you doing? All this is going on. And there's they're kibitzing for, probably 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'm like waiting for somebody to say go. There's this, slight pause in the conversation. And I said, "Well, good morning, sir. My name is John McDaniel. I'm blah, 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 blah. And today we have a briefing. This is what General Keane did. He starts flipping through the briefing. I'm on slide 2, okay, and he's like into the guts of this thing to find the answer he's looking for. He finds the answer that he's looking for, which I explained in one slide why they didn't get promoted. He takes the packet. I'm not kidding you. He takes the packet and he kind of like wings it. I'm like a frisbee, like a frisbee, if you will. Kind of does 3 or 4 rotations, hits the center of his table and slides towards the 3-star General Maud, and he looks right at him and he says, "Tim, the Army astronaut program is broken. Fix it." And he gets up and he leaves. Now, you could have heard a mouse urinate on a cotton ball in that room, I can tell you, because I wasn't saying nothing. And neither was anybody else. And so we leave. I'm thinking, I screwed this up. What did I do wrong? My God, everybody's getting fired. I have no idea, right? I've never briefed a 4-star in my life. So anyway, we get back on in the van. It's me, Al Baker, my colonel, and then Dorian Anderson, the 2-star general. And we're driving back. He's got a driver, and still nobody said a word. Nobody's even opened their mouth, and I can't take it anymore. So I go, hey, General Anderson's up front, where the officers always sit, to the right side of the driver, and I'm back in the cheap seats. And I said, "Hey, sir," he's like, he turned around and goes, "Yeah, what do you got, Ranger?" 'Cause, he knew who I was. And I said, "Ken, do you mind if I ask you a question?" He's like, "Go ahead, shoot." I said, "How'd you think that went?" I had to say it. I was like, I didn't know. I just want to know if I was fired. I didn't know. And he turns around, he's craning his neck back through the short bus there, and he's like, "You know something, Ranger, you managed to do something that very few people do at the Pentagon." And I said, "Oh, yes, sir, what's that?" He goes, "You got a decision. Good job, Ranger." And that's what's funny about it. Hey, there's General Keane. The Army astronaut program is broken. Tim, fix it. That's the decision. And for that, getting a decision out of the Pentagon, apparently was a red letter day. So, happy with that. But that's my one, anecdotal story there at PERSCON. The other I'll tell you real briefly, it's, mildly interesting, is I had the opportunity to, right after 9/11, to interview for President Bush 43, to be his aide de camp, for the President of the United States. And, so I won't bore you to tears with that, but, it was quite an honor, and, going to the White House, meeting the staff, the WWIA staff, and the incumbent aides. And, the President has an aide for every branch of the service. So there's an Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, probably now a Space Force dude or dudette, in there that's his aide de camp. So each service branch has got an aide to the President, and they all support the President, and kind of on a rotational basis. If he's flying somewhere, there's a couple aides with him, and they got specific missions and things that they do. So I thought it was quite an honor for me to, to be able to, do that, get that interview. And I thought I had won it. I really did. And so did the Army aide, the incumbent. He said, I was pulling for you, man. I thought you had it. But they ended up giving it to another guy who I think was probably the most, the deserving and best fit for that particular job. But it was, it was quite an honor for me, to do that. And I'll tell one quick story, because at some point, when I'm interviewing to be, this aide, of course, you've been through I don't know how many interviews, a lot, to include a polygraph. Where were you on the night of the 15th? You're being interrogated by the CIA. Just telling you, man. So the funny story there was, I'm sitting around in the downstairs in the bowels of the White House, sitting in the big high back leather chair, which happened to be the President's chair. And all the existing aides are in a semicircle around this table, and they're firing questions at me, and this is part of the interview process with them. And, it's everything from, what were the last 4 books you read, sort of thing, to what's your most embarrassing moment? And so I did my best to field, all of them. And one of the questions was, something about, carrying the football, and if the President's brother asked you to look in that attaché and that you're attaché, what do you do? Sort of thing. There's a few of those that kind of get you thinking, sort of thing. So we get all done with this interview process, which lasts about an hour, I think. And one of them says, "You got any questions of us?" And I said, "Yes, actually." I do. 2 things. I said, first off, the question about looking in the satchel. I said, "What's the right answer there?" They're like, one of them goes, "Welcome to our world." It's like, okay, got that. And secondly, I said, it just appears to me that this interview right here that we just did is the center of gravity for the decision that you guys are about to make, is for who gets this job. Does that sound fair? And the Marine looks at me and he goes, "Yes." I said, "Okay, that's what I thought. Well, I appreciate your time, gentlemen. Good night, everybody." And then I got a telephone call later that night, said, "Hey, you were close, but you didn't get the job." So anyway, that's my DC story. I'll end her here. And the next up is Jazz Rock, the Joint Southern Surveillance Reconnaissance Operations Center, Johnny Mac, going to Key West. The Florida Keys is next, folks. All right. Have a good night.
To learn more about the mission of the Wounded Warriors in Action Foundation and how you can get involved, please visit our website at WWIAF.org or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the WWIA Podcast and for helping us honor, connect, and heal our combat wounded Purple Heart heroes through the power of the great outdoors.
If you like what you're listening to here and would like to join our team in our mission to bring healing power and recovery to America's Purple Heart heroes, please become part of our Sponsor a Hero team by clicking on the link in the podcast notes or by going to wwiaf.org/sponsor. That's wwiaf.org/sponsor. Our heroes need you now more than ever. Thank you.